What is up, my friends and fellow busy bees? Do me a favor and look around if you are sitting in your home and take a look at the furniture that you have. Does any of it kind of look like wood? Like it has the appearance of being wood, but when you go to touch it or when you look at it on an angle, it's a little bit too uniform, a little bit too sleek, shiny, feels a little bit plasticky. I wouldn't be surprised if you looked around and you found a piece of this in your home because it is so common. It's much more inexpensive to manufacture than a solid wood piece, and it does the trick. It holds up. It maintains its structural integrity, and you can make it look a lot of different ways. This is laminate furniture, sometimes referred to as vinyl, and it's what we're going to talk about today and the different options that you have for making it look a little bit more updated. What laminate furniture is basically synthetic materials that are put together to create a thin layer that looks like wood, but it has different things and plastics mixed into it. It's made through a printing process where they literally print the look of wood, whatever wood species they're looking to emulate, onto this plastic and synthetic material, and then they put it over top of an MDF, which is a medium density fiber or particle board. So because it has that plastic in the materials, it looks a little bit more shiny than a wood finish would if it had a top coat on it. And when you go to touch it, you can just feel that typically there's no wood grain in there, although sometimes they do create a fake wood grain, so that's not necessarily a perfect giveaway. But a lot of the times it's just printed on there. It's a flat surface, but aesthetically it looks like it's wood. And a lot of the new furniture that you order from places like Wayfair or IKEA and those kinds of big retailers that are creating furniture that are trendy and stuff right now, they are typically made of this material. It's pretty uncommon to come across a solid wood piece, although IKEA does have a line of pine solid wood pieces. I think for the most part, it's going to be made of this, and you can tell if you look at the material, if there's a spot where it's unfinished, so it's kind of like where the end grain would be. Maybe it's at the bottom of the piece if you put it on its back. You'll be able to see that MDF board underneath the laminate sheet that is on top of it. And it just looks like those pressed board materials. So it's a bunch of like wood pieces essentially pressed really tightly, compressed together to create those boards. And again, this furniture is totally fine. It's of lesser lasting quality probably than a solid wood piece would be, and you are limited in what you can do to these pieces in terms of refinishing them, but they hold up just fine. And what I wanted to walk you through today is the process of painting these pieces, because since it's not solid wood, you can't sand them down and stain them a different color. Unfortunately, if you wanted a different wood look, you could paint it and use different painting techniques to emulate the look of wood. But again, you're going to be using paints and other tools to do that process. So I wanted to walk you through what you can do if you want to update these pieces, because I think a lot of the time people don't realize that that is an option, especially because it is so sleek and such a shiny finish for the most part. People probably assume that paint wouldn't stick to it, and if you just went up to the piece and slapped some paint on it, it probably wouldn't, or it wouldn't for long before it started to peel back after getting some light wear and tear. But if you follow these steps I'm going to walk you through, you can absolutely refresh these pieces and bring some new life to them. Before we even jump into that process, a reminder that there are so many things that you can do to aesthetically upgrade a piece without even having to do a full transformation like that. Things like switching out the hardware can make a huge impact on a piece. And keep in mind that you can switch it out for something at like Home Depot that's gold or silver or black or stainless steel knob or handle, and those are great options, but there are so many more other options out there. If you have something in mind that really speaks to you, or you're putting together a room that fits a certain style, maybe you're going for more of a boho aesthetic and you're looking to bring in those natural fibers and some texture into the space, look on places like, Amazon might have them, but a lot of the times Etsy, I find a lot of really cool hardware that's a lot more distinct. You can find things that are like rattan or woven knobs. Just honestly type in some keywords and start scrolling, because often I find that I don't necessarily know what I'm looking for until I see it. I'm like, that's the thing. That's what I need. That's what's going to go with this whole thing that I'm putting together. But I can't always visualize that prior to actually seeing it. So take a deep dive, and that can be a really quick and easy way to do that. If you're getting something a little bit more unique and custom on Etsy and stuff like that, you probably will pay a little bit more than something like grabbing a huge value pack on Amazon or something like that. But again, you're often supporting more local artists and getting a much more unique thing out of it, so you have more of a curated space. And for me, if it means a couple dollars in either direction, I'm going to pay for that upgrade to just have a space that feels more complete, makes everything feel like it goes together well, and it's just that unique thing that can make my furniture stand apart from the rest. So updating the hardware, you can also add liners in, which can give it a really great upgrade if your drawers or the backs of your shelves are just looking a little bit bleh, or you just want to add something that's a little bit brighter or a fun pop or something like that, just to switch it up. Adding things as liners are a great option, and again, you can look up drawer liners and get your average drawer liner on Amazon or at Home Depot, but get creative as well. You can look up different stationery, you can get wallpapers, peel and stick wallpapers, wrapping papers, you can even use fabric. So get creative and try and think of what you're trying to bring to the space, whether it's a certain color, a certain pattern, a certain texture. These are the things that can really stand out in your pieces, and when you're redecorating your home, the things that can help pull different aspects of a room together to create your unique design style. And maybe that would be something interesting to do as an upcoming episode, like the things that I take into account when I'm designing a space, not necessarily just doing the furniture makeover, but when I am doing it for my own home, or I've helped some other friends design and renovate their spaces as well and help them to curate all the home decor and the paint colors and the furniture and stuff for that space. If that's something that would be of interest to you, let me know, because that's actually something that I do often with my custom clients as well. They'll reach out and have a piece that they want upgraded, or they're doing a renovation in their space and they have a piece in mind that they want to use, but they don't necessarily know what will look good done to it. And I'll give them some options and ask them some questions that get them thinking about things they weren't necessarily considering, and they've expressed that it's been really helpful. So if that's something that would be helpful for you, reach out and let me know, and I'm happy to put together an episode about that. Well, let's get back to the laminate. So as with any furniture makeover, you're going to start with the cleaning process. And the easiest way to go about this is to get a little container, put some warm water in it, and add a couple drops of Dawn dish soap or another soap that has degreasing agents in it. You're going to mix that up, grab a microfiber cloth, and you're going to wipe down the entire piece. And be careful when doing this, because there may be certain parts of that piece that are unfinished, so it may expose that MDF board and not have the laminate surface on it. For example, on the very bottom of the piece, sometimes the bottoms of, or the underside of shelves as well are unfinished. So don't clean those with a wet cloth necessarily. A very lightly dampened one is okay, but you don't want to add a lot of moisture into that unfinished MDF board, because that can cause crumbling or warping over time, and it just takes a lot longer to dry out as well. So wipe down any of those laminate surfaces. Then once you get it all rubbed down and you get any grease and grime and dirt that may be left on those surfaces, wash out that cloth and come back with just a damp, with water only, microfiber cloth, wipe it all down again, and then let it sit to dry however long it needs. 10 minutes probably is fine. At this point, I would take apart anything that is easily able to be taken apart. So if there's any drawers in the piece, pull those out fully. Actually, do that when you're going to be cleaning if there's any drawers. But any doors that may be hanging on hinges, anything you need to pull apart that's going to make your painting process easier, I like to take that all apart, especially with these laminate pieces. They're usually not all that old. I do caution with some older antique pieces that are solid wood and things like that. There are times when I'll just keep them on the hinges, because realigning it after the fact can be a bit of a headache sometimes if those pieces have kind of settled in and ebbed and flowed with the weather and stuff over time. They can be sitting like a very perfect way that is hard to replicate again after the fact. But with laminate furniture, you're probably good to go. So take everything apart, make sure to put any of the hardware, the hinges, the screws, and all that stuff into a separate Ziploc bag and mark it so you don't lose any pieces. And then we're going to have to scuff sand the piece. And that's going to be the thing that really makes the difference of getting the paint to stick to the surface of that laminate material. Because, like I said, it's shiny, it's sleek, it's slick. So at this point, any paint would just scrape easily off of it. But if we rough it up first, it's going to give it something to grip to, something to give it a little bit more teeth so that a primer can sit a lot more securely on top of it. So in order to do that, you're going to get a mid-grit sandpaper. I would say something between 150 to 200 grit sandpaper. And you can do this by hand. You can do it with an electric sander if you have it, but doing it by hand is totally fine. A little tip that I find helpful is to put something that's about the size of like your fist, I would say, in your hand and wrap the sandpaper around it that has a flat surface to replicate a sanding sponge. If you have a sanding sponge at home, or if you're going out to purchase these products for the makeover, grabbing a sanding sponge is a great thing to use because it gives a little bit more surface area and it's all flat so that you can sand a lot quicker and easier, in my opinion. And they usually have a high, medium, and low grit option on those sponges or in that sponge pack. And you're going to go through and scuff sand. So the purpose of this step is to get rid of that shiny surface and rough it up as much as possible. You don't want to dig down into it and like get through that plasticky material, but you want to scuff it up so that once you wipe that clean, it's not going to look as perfectly slick and sleek as it once did, but it's going to look a little bit more matte and flat and almost like there's still dust on it, if that makes sense. So you can go side to side, you can do it in circles, whatever works, but again, don't push down too hard because you don't want to make imprints into the material or else that's going to show through when you go through and paint it after the fact, unless you end up filling it in, but we want to avoid that step. So scuff up that whole surface and do it anywhere that there's that laminate material. So that may be on the legs, that may be on the doors, front and back, wherever you're going to be painting, go through and scuff that up. And it's always good to do this somewhere that it is well ventilated and to wear a mask as well so that you don't get any of those particles that you're breathing in while you sand. And then once you go over the entirety of the piece, go through again with a damp, clean microfiber cloth and wipe away any of that dust or anything that's left over, and then let that dry thoroughly. And like I said, it should look a little bit more matte and less perfect now, but don't worry, it's going to look better. So now that we have that surface roughed up and ready to stick to something a lot more readily than it did before, we're going to add a primer on, and this is going to act like the inside of the sandwich that we want to create between the paint and the piece. So I recommend using a bonding primer of some sort because that's going to help stick to the surface of the laminate, and those kinds of primers are formulated to do just that. You'll see with certain primers that they have different qualities that they market themselves as. That might be stain blocking primers, for example, but that's not necessary in this case. Stain blocking primers are typically ones where they're trying to keep wood tannins at bay, and because we're not working with wood here, it's not an issue. So some sort of bonding primer, and there's some that are specifically made to stick better to things like laminate surfaces. The one that I typically will utilize is the Zinsser Bin shellac-based primer, just because it's what I keep on hand and it grips really well to a lot of different surfaces. You can use it on things like metal and glass as well, and it works well. So similarly, it's going to grip really well to that laminate surface. I recently worked on a set of office furniture where I did just this and it adhered great. So you're going to apply your first layer of primer. I would recommend doing 2 layers at a minimum. You can do more if you think it might need it, but 2 layers with the proper drying time in between and lightly scuff sanding in between with a higher grit sandpaper, something that's about 220 grit or higher, just to get rid of any imperfections that may be in that finish, and then wipe away the dust before you go in with your second layer of primer. I personally like to apply my primer with a foam roller. I find that it gives the best and smoothest finish, but you could also use a paintbrush or a paint sprayer if you have it. If you do opt to use a Zinsser Bin primer, I would recommend that you read the directions for cleaning prior to doing so because it is a product that sticks a lot. So there are things that you can buy to clean off your tools after, like ammonia or mineral spirits, but I typically will just use a very cheap chip brush or a foam roller and throw it out after I use it because it's honestly not worth the cleanup for me. But do what works best for you. And again, make sure you're wearing a mask because that is a product that has a really harsh chemical smell. So you want to use the proper respirator to filter out that from getting to your lungs. So now that we have a couple layers of primer on there, you can go ahead and paint. And theoretically speaking, if you are using a primer as well as a top coat after the fact, you can pretty much use any kind of paint and it will work fine. I do recommend using a furniture paint of some sort just because the formula is created to go on furniture and the type of wear and tear that furniture will get. My recommendation is always Fusion Mineral Paint, and I am one of their affiliates, so I do have a code to save you 10% on any of their products. If you're interested in using that, I will leave it in the show notes of this episode. You can click through, and it goes towards any of the products on their website, so you can also pick up some paintbrushes, some rollers, and that kind of stuff if you are looking for that. But I love using Fusion, and it works great on laminate furniture. I have done it in the past. I will continue to do it in the future. But you can go ahead and add that paint. I would say at a minimum 2 coats. I typically do 2 to 3 coats of paint on any of the pieces that I'm working on, if not more. Sometimes if you're using a really light color and you're going over a darker surface, you might need a couple more coats, but 2 to 3 you should be safe, especially if you have a white primer underneath. And again, I like to apply my paint using a foam roller, but you can use a paintbrush, a paint sprayer, or a roller, either foam or microfiber. Dealer's choice. I do find that a foam roller gives me the best, most flawless finish personally. And then for any of the detail spots, I'll use a denser paintbrush. And because Fusion Mineral Paint is water-based, you can clean up the paint that might be on your tool with just soap and water, which is great. So get your layers of paint on there. In between each layer, again, I recommend using that high grit sandpaper, 220 grit or higher, to lightly sand the surface to get rid of any imperfections and then wipe back any of the sanding dust that creates before you go in and add your next layer of paint. And once you've let that dry thoroughly, regardless of the product that you're using, make sure to read the directions to see if there's anything specific that you need to be doing and to also be aware of the drying times before you can recoat with the second coat of paint. Because sometimes it will be dry to the touch, but the way that the product is formulated will be in such a way that they need you to wait an extra hour or something like that before you go in and put the next layer of paint on. So be aware of that, regardless of the product you're using. Okay, so then you can be done if you choose to do so. However, to provide ample durability against wear and tear, especially if it's going to be something that's used fairly often, like the surface of a table or shelving, or something that's going to get a lot of things moving across it or hands on it or people rubbing up against it, I recommend adding a top coat of some sort to finish that off and give you a little bit of added protection. For the large majority of my pieces, I use a water-based polyurethane. I find that it gives great protection, a great finish, and it comes in different finish choices. So I typically go for a satin finish because it has a little bit of a sheen, but it's not necessarily glossy or too shiny. The one that I currently am using for all of my pieces is the one from Behr that you can get at Home Depot. It's the water-based high-performance polyurethane. It's in a blue can. And again, I recommend doing at least 2 layers of that. And I apply it with a foam roller. Rinse and repeat. And guess what I do in between each of the layers? I also lightly sand with a high grit sandpaper around 220 plus grit. And once those have dried, you can reassemble your piece, put things back together. Do be aware, though, that it takes up to 30 days, between 21 and 30 days for those products to fully cure together and cure to the piece. So in that time frame, I don't recommend putting anything on the pieces in terms of if you had lamps sitting on it, if you had decor and ways that you had it staged, if it is a shelving unit. Just take a couple weeks, put it in the corner, but keep those items off of it until it's fully cured. a minimum of 3 weeks, and then you can rearrange the things, and it'll just make sure that everything is nice and tight, it's nice and crisp and hard, and it's going to last for years and years to come. And then look at you! You updated your laminate furniture. Who would have known? And for the fraction of the cost of buying new. Good job. So frugal, so thrifty. And something you may not know about me is I love little motivational messages. They always get me fired up, and I keep a list of them in my phone in the Notes app. And I end every podcast episode with one that I've noted down over the years in the hopes that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever may come your way this week. So this week's Mel's motivational message is, the larger the apparent risk, the fewer people that will go there. Because if you have never done a furniture makeover before, let's face it, thinking about tackling one on a piece that is currently in your home that you know looks fine, maybe you don't love the look of it anymore, but like it does the trick and it's serving its purpose, and then you may have this idea to give it a makeover and maybe it would look good this color, but you've never done it before and you're worried that it might not turn out or you might screw it up, and then you probably won't want to keep it around because it will be ruined, so you'd have to buy a piece of furniture anyways, and so why don't you just switch it out for a new piece anyways, instead of potentially ruining it and then feeling shitty about yourself. And that is the path of least resistance. That is the path that a lot of people will take. However, if I may, for a moment, just challenge you to try something new, and you may surprise yourself and really enjoy it. When I first started out, that was exactly how I got into the swing of doing this stuff and got the itch for more, as I was just looking around my house and saw those nightstands sitting around from my grandmother that I wanted to refinish to use in our master bedroom. And it definitely went through my mind that it might turn out horribly and I may regret my decision. But instead, it worked out great. We still use them today, which was over 4 years ago. And then I loved it and I kept doing it, and now it's a business. So the larger the apparent risk, the fewer people will go there. So just give it a go. If nothing else, you know that you tried it and it's not your thing. And it is always possible to strip this stuff back and try again if maybe you don't get the smoothest finish and you're disappointed in that and you want to give it a go again. Scrape back that paint. You can sand it off. You can use a chemical stripper. You can even just scuff sand it so it's all smooth and flat and then go in with the next coat and start from scratch. There are so many options. You will not ruin that piece unless you go at it with a chainsaw accidentally and saw it in half. So why not add a little bit of spice into your life and try something new? And that goes in your day-to-day life when it comes to trying something new or tackling that New Year's resolution that you have. It may seem that there's a large risk involved in trying that and doing it. Maybe you think you're going to embarrass yourself by trying something. But the larger that risk is, the fewer people that will go there. And even if it doesn't work out for you, the people around you are going to admire you for having tried it and having the courage to do something new and try something that was outside of your comfort zone, because so many people go through their life staying in that box, staying in that comfort zone. And when they see people around them taking those risks and doing things that maybe seem a little bit scary to them, they just get inspired to do that in their own life. I've seen it for myself. I continue to see it in the people around me. And like I said, if nothing else, even if the thing doesn't work out, you'll know that you tried and you can have satisfaction in knowing that you tried something new. So remember that the larger the apparent risk, the fewer people that will go there. But I hope to see you there. All right, that's it. I appreciate your time, and I will see you guys next week.